My name is Harper. I am 25. It was a Saturday night in early October of 2023 in Killeen, Texas, the kind of warm evening where a small promotion dinner turns into a loud family event because everyone thinks their voice deserves the room. The place was a Texas grill, not far from Fort Cavazos. Yellow lights, long tables pushed together, sports on the wall, the hum of conversations thick enough that jokes can turn into insults without anyone feeling responsible. I arrived a few minutes late, slid into the edge of the table, and had not even ordered water when my brother Cole stood up. Cole is 30, the golden child, the one who talks like a host even when no one asked him to host. My mom Diane sat beside him, smiling the practiced smile she uses when she wants things to look normal. Gary, my stepdad, leaned back with the tone of a man who likes to lecture about respect. Aunt Denise was already halfway into a grin that never quite reaches her eyes. There were a few of Cole's friends there too, some from work, some in uniform, which made the room public in a way that matters. Cole raised his glass and started a toast that sounded harmless for about 3 seconds. Then he turned his body toward me. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell beer on his breath, and he reached out. He pinched the fabric at my shoulder, brushed the insignia like it was lint, and said loud enough for the table to hear that I was wearing it like it meant something. He followed with the line he had clearly saved for an audience that some people earn it and some people borrow it. Laughter broke out in pockets. Someone clinked a glass. The game on the television kept rolling. I did not raise my voice. I did not say a word. My throat tightened in that familiar way, the way it does when you realize the room has decided who you are for the night. If you have ever been disrespected by your own family, stay with me. This was not the first time Cole controlled the story. It was just the first time he put his hand on my uniform to do it. Diane tilted her head and said I was too sensitive. Gary cleared his throat and said, "Respect is earned the way people do when they want to sound fair while choosing a side." Denise added that at least I looked the part. It was the kind of moment that feels small and huge at the same time small, because it is just a dinner huge because it tells you exactly where you stand. I sat still and watched the room the way I always do, noting the exits, the cadence of voices, the rhythm of plates and silverware. I noticed things I did not comment on, like the change in the noise level near the door and the way a few heads turned for half a second. I kept my eyes on the table. I did not explain my job. I never do. Explaining has never changed anything at this table. Cole kept talking, warming up to the sound of himself asking what I actually do, laughing about paperwork. Diane chimed in that I am dramatic. Gary started with "in my day." Denise smiled that tight smile again. I said, "Not tonight." Then I said, "Drop it, Cole." He did not. He leaned closer than a joke needs, and his fingers returned to my shoulder. This is the part where people expect shouting. It did not happen. I did the only thing the military ever taught me that works in rooms like this. I stayed disciplined. I looked at my watch. I gave him 10 seconds to stop. He did not stop. The room felt like a held breath, the kind you only notice when it is about to break. Stay with me. You will want to hear what happened next. After Cole finished laughing, and the room settled into that uncomfortable half-silence, the kind where people pretend nothing just happened, I stayed where I was. I did not look down. I did not look around for support. I kept my eyes on the table because I already knew what I would find if I looked up. Faces angled away. Small smiles that said, "Not my problem." That was the pattern in my family. It always had been. Cole said things out loud. Everyone else decided whether to laugh or look away, and somehow that always landed on me. When I say this did not start that night, I mean it literally. I remember being 16 when Cole got his first car. A used truck, nothing fancy, but my parents threw a party like he had won something. Neighbors came. My mom made a speech about how proud she was. I stood in the kitchen washing dishes because someone had to. When I asked about driving lessons later that year, Diane laughed and said we would see. We never did. Cole got praised for ambition. I got told to be practical. Years later, when I signed the papers to join the military, the reaction was not fear or pride. It was dismissal. Diane said girls do not last. Gary said it was probably just paperwork anyway. Denise joked that at least I would look good in uniform. Cole told people I was doing it for attention. Nobody asked why. Nobody asked what it took. I learned early that explaining myself only gave them more to work with. So I stopped. I showed up. I did the work. I kept my head down. That habit did not start in uniform. It started at this table. The night at the grill felt like a summary of everything. Diane leaned toward Cole and said I was always sensitive the way she does when she wants to sound reasonable. Gary followed with his favorite line, "Respect is earned," but his eyes never left me when he said it. Denise smiled and added, "At least she looks the part," which landed like a compliment until you heard the laugh under it. The message was simple. Cole was the real thing. I was pretending. That is how they defined it. And definitions matter in families like mine. They become facts if you let them. I swallowed and took a breath through my nose. I could feel that familiar pressure behind my eyes, the one that comes when you realize nobody is going to step in. The restaurant noise kept moving around us. Plates clinked. Someone cheered at the television. A server passed by and hesitated, then kept going. Cole leaned back in his chair like he had just finished a set. He was enjoying this. He always did when he could control the story. I thought about the second flashback without meaning to. Basic training graduation. I stood there in line, exhausted and proud in a quiet way. Cole did not come. Diane sent a text saying traffic was bad. Gary said he would catch the next one. Denise commented on a photo later with a thumbs-up emoji. When I tried to tell them about what it had taken, the nights, the strain, the discipline, Diane cut me off and said not to brag. Gary said everyone works hard. Cole asked if it was scary for a girl. That was the moment I stopped sharing milestones. They did not want details. They wanted control. Back at the table, Cole picked up his glass again like he was thinking of another joke. He asked me what I actually do, stretching the word actually like it was funny on its own. He guessed paperwork. He guessed errands. He guessed things that made the people around him comfortable. Diane nodded along. Gary leaned in and said, "Everyone has their role." Denise tilted her head and smiled that smile again. I said not tonight. It came out calm, almost boring. Cole laughed and said I could not take a joke. Diane said, "See sensitive." Gary said, "Respect is earned again slower this time," like he was teaching a lesson. That was when I felt the isolation settle in. Not just emotional, physical. Chairs angled away, bodies turned toward Cole. I was at the edge of the table, but somehow even further out. That is what favoritism does. It makes you visible as a target and invisible as a person. I knew something they did not, and it would have been easy to say it. I knew about a schedule change at the installation that week, a routine adjustment tied to a regional review. Nothing classified, nothing dramatic, but enough to mark the difference between someone on the inside and someone guessing. I heard Gary mention a rumor about it earlier and get it wrong. I kept quiet. Breadcrumbs are not meant to be dropped early. Discipline means knowing when not to speak. Cole leaned forward again and asked if I was embarrassed yet. He said it like a favor, like he was giving me a chance to laugh it off. Diane sighed like I was making things difficult. Denise said at least she looks the part again, louder this time. The laughter was thinner now. People were watching to see what I would do. This is where families like mine expect you to apologize for existing. I felt my throat tighten. I swallowed. I kept my hands flat on the table. I did not look at the watch yet. That came later. Right then I focused on breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I reminded myself why I stayed quiet. Because reacting would give them exactly what they wanted. Proof. Proof that I was emotional. Proof that Cole was right. Silence was not weakness. It was restraint. The jokes stopped being jokes. They became statements. Cole said some people borrow things they did not earn. Diane nodded. Gary said respect is earned again, louder like a verdict. Denise laughed. I felt the room close in without anyone moving. That is escalation, not shouting, agreement. I was no longer a person at the table. I was a concept they could all point at. The fake one, the sensitive one, the one who should know her place. I took another breath and let the moment pass through me without breaking me. Tell me you have seen a family like this. The moment I asked if anyone had seen a family like this, I could almost feel the answer from the room. Plenty of people had. That was why they were watching. It is easier to watch someone else take the hits than admit you have taken the same ones. Cole took the silence as permission. He pushed his chair back a little and stood up again, not because the toast needed a second round, but because he wanted the floor. He loved the floor. He held his glass at chest height like he was making a point. Then he smiled at the people from his unit who had come along. A couple of them gave him that polite grin you give when you are not sure if a joke is going to turn ugly, but you do not want to be the one who stops it. Cole looked back at me and said he wanted to say something about family. The word family sounded like a weapon in his mouth. He started telling a story about me that was close enough to the truth to feel believable and twisted enough to make me smaller. He said I had always been the one who tried to stand out. He said I used to wear costumes as a kid and pretend I was someone important. He said it like he was remembering something cute, but the room heard the implication. Pretend. He made a joke about how I probably joined the military because I liked uniforms and attention. He did not say attention the way you say it when you mean it kindly. He said it like I had cheated. Diane laughed a little too quickly and looked around to see if everyone else was laughing too. Denise made a sound like a chuckle that never actually became one. Gary nodded as if he had been waiting for someone to say this out loud. Cole turned the story into a mini speech, the kind people give when they want to embarrass you and call it honesty. He said the military was not a stage. He said people earn respect with sweat, not with outfits. Then he aimed it right at my chest, right where the uniform sat clean and pressed, doing its job of keeping me composed on the outside even when my insides were tight and hot. He asked again, "So what do you actually do?" And he paused long enough for the question to sting. Then he answered for me with that laugh that makes you feel like you are 12. Paperwork. He looked at his friends like he had delivered the punchline. One of them laughed, another shifted in his seat and took a drink. Diane jumped in with the same line she uses every time she wants to make my reaction the problem. She has always been dramatic. She drew out the word dramatic like it explained everything. Like I was not someone with reasons, just someone with a defect. Gary followed with his favorite lead-in in my day, and he said it with confidence even though he was not the kind of man who had ever carried the weight he pretended to understand. He talked about real men. He talked about discipline. He talked about respect. He did not look at Cole while he said it. He looked at me because in this family the lecture always lands on the person who is already bleeding quietly. My hands stayed flat on the table. My shoulders stayed relaxed. I kept my voice low when I spoke. Not tonight. That was all. Cole grinned wider as if my calm response proved I had nothing to say. He stepped closer to the table, leaning in, crowding my space without technically touching me yet. He asked if I was embarrassed. He asked if I wanted to explain myself to the people who were actually serving. He said actually again. Diane sighed like I was making her tired. Denise tilted her head and said, "At least she looks the part," and this time she said it like a sentence you put on a gravestone. Gary murmured, "Respect is earned under his breath like an amen." I met Cole's eyes for a second and said, "Drop it, Cole." 2 words. A boundary. He did not respect it. He never respected boundaries that did not benefit him. He angled his body so the table could see him, and I could see the table. He wanted witnesses. He wanted the room to be a court where he was both judge and comedian. I could feel the shift. It was subtle like a current changing direction. People stopped eating. A fork paused in midair. The television noise kept going, but the little bubble around us tightened. Cole was enjoying the attention. He was feeding it. He asked his friends if they thought my uniform looked official. He asked if it was cute. He was careful with his words, so he could always say it was a joke later. But the goal was not laughter. The goal was to make me feel like I did not belong in my own skin. That is what humiliation is when it is done well. It does not need screaming. It just needs an audience and a target. Then from the corner of my vision I noticed movement near a table behind Cole. The door had opened a minute earlier and I had registered it without turning my head. Years of habit. A person entered civilian clothes, steady posture, not looking lost. I did not stare. I did not need to. Something in the way the room adjusted told me enough. A couple of people stood straighter. A server changed direction mid-step. It was not dramatic. It was recognition. My pulse stayed even, but my awareness sharpened. I kept my gaze on the table. I did not give Cole the satisfaction of looking distracted. He was still talking. He was still narrating my life like it belonged to him. He said I should lighten up. He said I should apologize for killing the mood. He said the whole table came out to celebrate him and I was ruining it with my attitude. Diane nodded hard and said, "See, there it is." Gary leaned in and said, "If you cannot take a joke, you should not wear the uniform like it makes you special." Denise laughed again, louder, inviting the others to join. Cole stepped closer, close enough now that the smell of beer hit me again, and he pointed at my chest like he was pointing at evidence. He said, "Go on, Harper. Say you are sorry. Just say it. Apologize for making this awkward. Apologize for acting like you are above everyone. Apologize for stealing attention." My throat tightened, not from fear. From the familiar humiliation of being asked to confess to something I did not do just to keep the peace. I swallowed once and kept my voice level. Not tonight. I did not repeat it loudly. I did not argue. I did not explain. I could feel eyes on me from every angle. I could feel the room waiting for the moment I broke. Cole leaned in another inch, smiling like he could taste it. "Don't skip this part." Cole took one more step in, close enough that the edge of the table pressed into my thighs, close enough that the room felt smaller, tighter, like the air had been turned down. He lifted his hand in a gesture that looked playful to anyone who wanted to pretend. 2 fingers pinched the edge of my collar and tugged it into place like he was fixing something sloppy. Then his knuckles brushed the insignia, not hard, just enough to register. A casual violation. The kind people excuse because it is not loud. I felt a cold line run from the base of my neck down my spine, sharp and clean, the way your body reacts before your mind decides anything. I did not flinch. I did not lean back. I did not raise my voice. Inside, something shut. Not anger, not fear. A door closing. I had learned that feeling a long time ago. It is the moment when you stop negotiating with the situation and start measuring it. Cole laughed and said, "Relax." He said he was just helping me look presentable. Diane let out a breath like this was all getting silly. Gary said nothing, but his eyes stayed fixed on my chest, like the uniform was the problem, and not the hand touching it. Denise leaned forward to see better. The table had fully turned into an audience now. Forks rested on plates. Drinks hovered mid-air. Someone whispered. Cole kept talking because silence makes people like him uncomfortable. He said, "If you did not earn it, take it off." He said it like a challenge wrapped in a joke. He said, "You are embarrassing the family." He said it slowly, savoring it, making sure everyone heard. I felt that cold line again, steadier this time. The uniform is not fabric to me. It is not a costume. It is a boundary. It marks where jokes stop. When his fingers hooked the shoulder seam and gave it a small pull, that boundary moved from abstract to physical. I let my hands rest on the table and kept my breathing even. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I did not look at him. I looked down at my wrist. The watch face was plain, nothing flashy, the kind you buy because it works. The second hand swept cleanly, ticking off time without drama. 1, 2. The sound of a spoon tapping a glass somewhere to my left cut through the hum of the room. 3, 4. The television crowd noise rose and fell. 5. Someone coughed. 6. The yellow light above us buzzed faintly. 7. I remembered a line someone once said to me during a long night when tempers were high and mistakes were expensive. You do not raise your voice. You raise the standard. It had stuck because it was simple. And because it worked. 8. Cole leaned closer. His voice, lower now, more intimate, more dangerous. He said, "Go on, prove it. Take it off." 9. Diane shifted in her seat and said Cole enough, but her tone lacked force. It sounded like habit, not protection. Gary cleared his throat. Denise smiled like she was watching a show she enjoyed. 10. The second hand completed its arc. Cole did not stop. His fingers tightened for a fraction of a second, enough to make the message clear. He was not joking anymore. The room felt like a held breath. I lifted my eyes from the watch and met his gaze. Not with anger, not with pleading, but with something flat and final. I did not say anything. I did not need to. The standard had already been raised. The table was silent now, fully the way a place goes quiet when everyone senses a line has been crossed and no one knows who will respond. Cole opened his mouth to say something else, to keep control, to push me one step further toward the apology he wanted. His hand was still on my shoulder. The weight of it felt heavier now, not because it pressed harder, but because it no longer had the cover of humor. This was the point of no return. The uniform had been touched. The symbol had been challenged. The demand had been made in public. Whatever happened next would not be a misunderstanding. It would be a consequence. I kept my posture steady and my voice inside my head calm. Stay until the next 10 seconds. The door opened and closed without ceremony, the way it does a dozen times an hour in a place like that. And no one looked because the noise was still thick, and the televisions were still loud, and everyone thought the moment belonged to the table. A person stepped inside, mid-40s, maybe early 50s, civilian clothes that did not try to impress anyone, posture straight, without stiffness, eyes moving once around the room and then stopping. He did not raise his voice. He did not hurry. Presence does not need speed. His gaze landed on Cole's hand where it rested on my shoulder-seam fingers, still curled like he had forgotten they were there. The room did not register the shift all at once. It happened in pieces. A server slowed. A chair scraped softly. A conversation near the bar trailed off. Then the voice cut through the noise, calm and flat, carrying just enough authority to reorder the air without forcing it. Hands off, now. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Cole froze like someone caught mid-sentence, his fingers releasing me on instinct before his brain caught up. He turned confused, a half-smile still on his face because he was used to smiling his way out of things. The man did not repeat himself. He did not explain. He looked past Cole and met my eyes for a brief second, just long enough to confirm what he needed. Harper, with me. 2 sentences. That was all. The effect was immediate and unmistakable. The table went silent. Not the awkward silence of a joke gone wrong, but the sharp quiet that follows a command. People recognize, even if they cannot name it. A server near the end of the table straightened without thinking. Someone at a nearby booth stopped mid-bite. A man 2 tables over lowered his drink and watched without blinking. I stood up smoothly, chair sliding back once, cleanly, no rush. My hands stayed at my sides. I did not look at Cole. I did not need to. I could feel his confusion radiating toward me like heat. He finally found his voice and it came out thinner than before. "Who are you?" The man did not look at him. Not yet. Not until the question had nowhere else to go. Then he turned his head just enough to acknowledge the sound. "Not your concern." The words were delivered without insult, without explanation, without apology. They landed harder than shouting ever could. Cole opened his mouth again and nothing came out. Diane had gone pale. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap like she was bracing for something she could not control. Gary sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, the lecture he had prepared evaporating in the space between his teeth. Denise's smile had disappeared entirely, replaced by a look that tried to rearrange the scene into something familiar and failed. I stepped around the table toward the man, my movements measured professional, the way my body knows how to move when things shift from personal to procedural. As I passed, I heard a whisper from somewhere behind me. "Wait, that's Harper." The whisper moved like a ripple. Heads turned. Someone else murmured the name again, this time with a question mark. Cole looked at me, then really looked like he was seeing a stranger wearing my face. The man spoke again, still calm, still quiet. "You are on duty status. You should know better." It was a detail, a small one, the kind that does not mean anything to people guessing from the outside, but to those who understand the structure, it was enough. A man near the end of the table said "ma'am" under his breath without realizing he had done it. The word hung there, awkward and undeniable. Cole's eyes flicked between us, his face draining of color as the pieces began to assemble themselves against his will. He took a step back as if distance might change what was happening. I stopped beside the man and waited, eyes forward, posture, neutral breathing, steady. The room stayed silent, the televisions now muted by comparison, the world narrowed to the space between us. Diane finally spoke, her voice small and brittle, asking what was going on. No one answered her. The man did not owe explanations to the room. He turned slightly toward me again, lowered his voice just enough to keep it contained. "We will talk outside." I nodded once. Simple. Clean. Cole tried to recover his voice, climbing into a register that did not fit the room anymore. "This is a family matter." He reached out like he might touch me again, then stopped short when the man's eyes snapped back to him. That look did not carry anger. It carried consequence. Family does not excuse conduct. That was all he said. Nothing else. The effect was devastating. The idea that Cole had been using all night like a shield collapsed in front of him. Family, joke, tone. None of it mattered now. The room seemed to exhale all at once, a low sound of realization passing from table to table. I could feel the weight of eyes on my back as we turned toward the door. I did not look for reactions. I did not need them. The exposure had already happened, not because someone had shouted my title or listed my accomplishments, but because protocol had spoken where excuses failed. As we walked, I caught one more whisper, this one closer, urgent and incredulous. "That's not support." Cole heard it too. I knew he did because he flinched. The door opened again, and the cooler air rushed in. The man held it briefly, then let it close behind us, cutting off the noise, the laughter that had dyed the table, that would never look the same again. "If you served, you know what that tone means." Outside the restaurant, the air felt cooler and thinner, like the pressure had finally dropped. I stood near my car with the door open, hands resting on the roof, breathing slow and steady until my pulse settled into something familiar. Reyes stayed a step away, not crowding, not rushing, letting the moment decompress the way it needed to. He asked a few questions in the order that matters. "Who touched you? Where did it happen? Did you tell him to stop? Were there witnesses? Did you feel unsafe?" I answered each one plainly, without adjectives, without commentary. "Yes." "At the table? Twice? Many?" "No, but the boundary was crossed." He nodded once at the right places, writing nothing down, yet just confirming the shape of it. He did not ask me to explain my family. He did not ask why it hurt. He asked what the conduct was and whether it continued after a clear directive. That was enough. He told me to wait there while he stepped back inside to speak to the manager and the senior person on duty, who had already identified themselves by the way they stood when he spoke. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open and watched the lights from the parking lot reflect on the windshield. The sound of the door opening and closing behind him carried once, then stopped. I breathed. When he returned, he told me what would happen next without drama. Statements would be taken, the incident would be reviewed, there would be no informal handling. He said it in a way that meant exactly what it said and nothing more. I nodded. Inside, the consequences were already moving. Cole would be placed under review. Not a sentence, not a spectacle, just a pause that costs opportunities. A pause that people notice. In communities like ours, pauses speak loudly. Word travels. Not as gossip at first, but as changed posture, as invitations that do not come, as conversations that go quiet when you approach. The family felt it too. By the time I drove home, my phone buzzed twice and I did not answer. The next morning, Diane called. Her voice sounded practiced, as if she had rehearsed the tone that would make me feel unreasonable. She said I had gone too far. She said it was just a joke and that I embarrassed everyone. She said people were talking and that I needed to fix it. I told her I was not discussing it. She said I was tearing the family apart. I told her no. I hung up. Days passed. The story did not get louder. It got colder. Cole did not show up where he used to. The easy access he relied on tightened. People who had laughed at the table stopped meeting his eyes. The narrative he liked to control did not obey him anymore. A few weeks later, my phone lit up with his name. The message was short and familiar. "We are family. Let us move on." It was followed by another. "I can help smooth this out. I can talk to people. I can make this easier for you." The offer was wrapped in concern and edged with control, the same shape it always had. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the urge to explain rise and pass like a wave. I typed 2 words and stopped. Then I sent one. "No." He wrote back immediately, the tone sharpening. "Not like this." I waited. Then I sent the last one. "Not anymore." That was it. I put the phone down and went back to folding laundry. The consequences did not explode. They settled. Cole tried to leverage favors and found they did not move the way they used to. The people who mattered paid attention to conduct and tone and boundaries. The people who did not faded. Diane stopped calling as often. When she did, she spoke carefully, like someone walking around a cracked floor. Gary avoided the topic entirely. Denise went quiet. The circle adjusted. I kept my routine: work, gym, groceries, sleep. I did not celebrate. I did not feel victorious. I felt aligned. There is a difference. The justice was procedural, boring to outsiders, devastating to those who depend on image. Cole learned what happens when you confuse family with permission. I learned that boundaries hold when you do not apologize for them. Would you forgive him? Be honest. Life settled back into its ordinary shape in a way that surprised me. Not with fireworks or apologies or speeches, but with mornings that looked the same as the ones before, and felt lighter because something heavy had finally been set down. I went back to duty and did the work the way I always had, focused and quiet, letting the structure carry me. I went to the gym early before the crowd, headphones on, counting reps instead of replaying conversations. I stood in the laundromat on a Sunday afternoon watching the machines turn, the smell of detergent sharp and clean, the rhythm steady enough to think without spiraling. I bought groceries on my way home and took my time in the aisles, choosing things I liked without considering who might comment. There was no rush anymore, no need to brace. I was not happy in a loud way. I was relieved. That difference mattered. The boundary I had never been allowed to place had finally held, and the silence that followed felt earned. I did not gloat. I did not wait for updates about Cole. When his name came up less often, I noticed without satisfaction. When it stopped coming up at all, I accepted that too. The family adjusted in their own way. Diane learned to speak carefully, measuring her words like someone who had learned that not everything bends. Gary kept his opinions to himself. Denise found other tables. There was no grand reconciliation and no dramatic exile. There was distance, and distance did its quiet work. In places where people understand service, the shift was subtle and complete. Invitations changed. Conversations paused when they should. Respect arrived without announcement, because it follows consistency, not explanations. I did not feel the need to tell my side. I had done that enough for one lifetime. One evening after a long day, I was loading my car when a stranger passing by nodded and said, "Mom," not loudly. Not for show, just a reflex of recognition. I nodded back and kept moving. Another morning, my phone rang with a number I recognized, and a voice I trusted said, "They will brief you tomorrow. No details, no build-up, just the next step." That was enough. The world did not need to know more, and neither did my family. The point had never been to reveal anything. It had been to live without shrinking. I thought about the table at the restaurant sometimes, about how quickly laughter can turn into permission, and how easily people confuse familiarity with entitlement. There are families that only understand boundaries when they see consequences, not because they are cruel, but because they are comfortable. Comfort resists change. Consequences move it. I also thought about honor, how it is not a speech or a symbol, but a series of choices made when no one is keeping score. Honor is keeping your voice low when you could raise it. It is walking away without explaining when explanation would only feed the noise. It is living correctly and letting the rest fall into place. Peace did not arrive as forgiveness. It arrived as alignment. My days matched my values. My nights were quiet. My shoulders were not tight anymore. If this hit close to home, you know what to do.